Hi y'all, welcome to our second lesson on plants. Again, I'm going to keep this lesson under 30 minutes, so please stay here for the full 30 minutes. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out via email. I still have our calendar up here, so today we are doing plants. On Friday, we will be starting body systems review, but over here, please look and see that we have a quiz over D1 and D2, which just means day 1, viruses, and day 2, today, plants. So remember that you're going to have an online quiz due Friday at midnight, so you can go on whenever you feel prepared to take it. It will close down all other browser windows, so make sure any notes that you have are either printed or written down on a separate sheet of paper. You also have homework for day 1 and day 2 due at midnight as well. I will extend the day 3 homework until this Tuesday the 31st. Really quickly, I wanted to start going over our virus exit ticket. The main point of teaching bacteria and viruses was to compare and contrast them, and I want to let y'all know, if you did not know, antibiotics do not treat viruses. They treat bacteria only, so this one was false. Viruses are not alive. That is true. If you have questions about that, please go back to the old video. This was an old star question. Cold sores are caused by herpes, which is a virus. A company wants to develop an antiviral drug. What do they need to study? They don't need to know how related they are. They don't need to know the metabolism, and they don't know meiosis is a part of cell division. And viruses actually can't do cell division. So we know that one's not right. So the answer is going to be A. And this last one is asking what kind of life cycle does the coronavirus has? We actually went over that in the video. The coronavirus sets in between 2 to 14 days, which is relatively quick. And it told you that they occur 2 to 7 days, so it's quick. Is lysogenic or lytic quick? It is lytic. So we know we can cross off those. It's either B or D. And we know that it's lytic because of the quick onset of symptoms. So if you put those answers on your exit ticket, know that you got all of those correct. This last one, I had a lot of people write really, really great answers on. And I wanted to shout out Perla, Alasia, Marissa, Alex, Mackenzie H, Kristen, Madison W, and Jonathan. I read through all of y'all's answers if you submitted them by midnight last night, and those were all perfect. I have 3 here that were exemplar answers from Perla, Alex, and Madison W. But if y'all remember, we talked about how the genome size is getting larger as you go this direction, and the mutation rate is getting higher as you go up. So eukaryotes have a low mutation rate because they have a higher or a larger genome or DNA. And so viruses have a high mutation rate because they have a smaller genome or smaller RNA. Okay, so if you still have questions on that, please go back to my other video and watch those couple 2 or 3 minutes where I explain this graph. Today we are talking about plants. We're going to start with the anatomy of the flower. Very similar to the anatomy of the body. It's just the parts of the flower. There are 3 major systems. Okay, the first one that we are going to talk about is going to be, I think we start with the roots. So the roots are down here. That's one system. The next thing that's really, really important is the stem. And then we also have the leaves. So the roots and the stem actually support the system, the vascular system in plants, which basically is all about transport of materials up and down. But there's a couple things. So they are not only absorbing water and other minerals from the soil, but they also keep the plant grounded. So we like to say they anchor the plant in the soil. Okay, so those are the kind of 2 functions. Stems, on the other hand, provide support for the plant and house the vascular system of the plant, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. So how's the vascular system? They also give leaves and flowers better access to sunlight and to pollinators. Some stems can actually store food, while other stems are adapted to store water, such as cacti. So obviously each plant's going to be different. Just so y'all know, there are two different types of roots that I forgot to mention. There's fibrous roots, and there's a taproot. Okay, so those are the two different types of root. And the last thing that we are going to talk about is we are going to talk about leaves. And I have a whole separate slide for leaves because leaves are extremely important. Okay, they are the main photosynthetic organ in plants. And what does photosynthetic mean? It means that they are going to do photosynthesis. So again, they're the main photosynthetic organ in plants. And so they do photosynthesis. So we're going to write the formula for photosynthesis in the bottom. I'm going to challenge y'all to pause the video if you know it off the top of your head. We talked about it a long, long time ago, but I'm going to write it out if you do not remember. The first thing is we need CO2, which is carbon dioxide. That's a gas. We also need water. And we need sunlight. And that gives us O2, which is oxygen, and sugar. Leaves have a very large surface area. I'm going to put SA for surface area, which means they are flat and they are wide, so that they can actually take in a lot of sunlight for photosynthesis. They also have structures that capture energy from sunlight that are called chloroplasts. So again, they have chloroplasts in them that capture the energy from the sunlight. And on the bottoms of leaves, they also have something called stomata, which we're going to talk about now. So stomata are small holes on the bottom or the underside of leaves. Okay, and they actually, their whole purpose, their main purpose is to allow for gas exchange. Okay, and what we mean by gas exchange is that we actually, if you go back to our photosynthesis formula, we need two gases. We need carbon dioxide to be taken in by the plant, and we need to release oxygen. Okay, those are our two gases. So we have to be able to exchange those gases somehow. So again, these stomata allow for that gas exchange to actually happen. So CO2 goes in and O2 comes out. So I'm going to put CO2 in, O2 goes out, if you can see that. But there is another thing that happens because stomata can be open. Stomata can also allow too much water to escape during a process called transpiration. So I'm going to write that here. Transpiration. When it's exchanging those gases, it can also let water escape. And we also still need water for photosynthesis to happen. So it's not always good for water to be able to escape. So actually, in order to be able to control how much water is able to leave, stomata have this cool ability to open and close. Okay, in response to different weather conditions. So when it's really cool outside and we're not really worried about losing a lot of water due to evaporation, our stomata might be open, as seen in this picture right here. This might be at night or when it's really, really cool. Now, a weather environment where we don't want our stomata to be open, and this shows our stomata closed over here, is during the daytime when the sun is blazing, because that can also cause water to evaporate easier. When it's either the daytime or really hot outside, we might want our stomata closed, and just to wait for the nighttime to come to open and allow that gas exchange to happen. The last thing that we have to talk about for plant anatomy is the different parts of our flower. Hopefully you recognize this picture when we did our plant lab, but I'm going to go through the different parts of the flower. Now, if y'all remember, we have the first part down here that protects the bud. This is our bud all the way down here. And the first thing that protects our bud is our sepal. The next thing, this is our brightly colored petal that attracts pollinators. And a pollinator can be a bee, any sort of animal that is going to take the pollen, which is found on this thing right here, this anther, which is held up by the filament, and transfer it where we need to go all the way to here, which is going to be our female part. So these two parts make up the male parts of our flower. And we've got three parts that make up our female. So the first part all the way at the top, we have our stigma. That's all the way at the top. Now, if pollen happens to land on our stigma, it actually will travel down this thing called a pollen tube, which is also part of the style. It's the next tube. And it'll eventually lead to the ovary, and all three of these parts make up what we call our female parts of our flower. We also call it the pistil. And if you notice, there are only one pistil. There's one pistil in the center right here, and there's only one of those. Now, our male part we sometimes call a stamen. And how many stamen do we have in this picture? We have one. I'm going to do them in red. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have a larger number of stamen and a smaller number of pistils. Why might that be the case? Okay, our pistils is what we need to fertilize, right? We need pollen to land on top here and then travel downward. Now, our stamen has all of our pollen. So we have a larger number of stamen to increase our chance of pollination. Now, the next part of our lesson that we are going to talk about is plant tissues. And I believe that most people got this lesson, but this was a later lesson for plants. It was actually given after our test, I think, if I remember correctly. But there are three different types of tissues. We have the dermal tissue, right here, we have ground tissue and vascular tissue. So we're going to go through all three of those. If you notice, we're going to start all the way down dermal, down here. Okay, dermal is surrounding the outside, the very outside of the cross section. So if we were to cut our plant right here and look at it on a microscope slide, this is what it would look like. The dermal tissue actually makes the outer layer of the plant. Okay, so this is protective. It's our protective layer on the outside. And it sometimes secretes a waxy layer called the cuticle. So it makes up the cuticle, which is waxy, that will inhibit water loss, which means it's going to keep as much water in the plant as possible, which is what we want. In humans, the dermal layer is very similar to skin for humans. Now, the next tissue layer that we have for plants is going to be our ground tissue, and it makes up everything in the inside. Okay, it makes up most of our tissue. So I'm going to put ground tissue right here. Ground tissue. Again, it makes up the inside of the plant. And it contains different types of cells that provide structure. It also stores nutrients like water or food or sugars that are made from photosynthesis. And these are also the cells that actually perform photosynthesis. And then lastly, we have our vascular tissue, which honestly might be the most important because it's all about our transport, okay? So vascular tissue is about transporting water, so H2O, and other nutrients, okay, throughout the plant. And it's made up of these two important words, xylem and phloem. I would know both of those words for your quiz on Friday. So to start off with, this is my picture of my xylem on the left here. So I'm going to put xylem over here. Xylem is actually made of hollow dead cells. And so it'll look like these larger holes. But what's kind of interesting is that it moves only water. And it's moving the water from the roots, which is where they are absorbed. So water is only absorbed in the roots. Can a plant absorb water from its leaves? No, it actually loses water in its leaves because of those stomata. So it can only move water from roots to the leaves. So xylem actually only move in one direction, and that direction is up. Sorry, that you can't really see that arrow. They are only moving, again, from the roots all the way up to the leaves. So it's actually, we call it unidirectional. And this process of moving water is called transpiration. And if you remember that word transpiration, it means the movement of water or the evaporation of water from the plant. So we also talked about transpiration. I'm going to go back all the way to our stomata. We also talked about transpiration here. So it's when water can escape from the stomata. So please remember this vocab word, transpiration, can mean evaporation or movement of water up and down the plant. And what's kind of cool about the xylem is that it will actually expand as the plant grows, which is kind of unique. Over here on the other side, we actually have our phloem on this right side of our picture. Phloem is actually made of living cells. Remember, xylem is made of dead cells. Phloem is actually made of living cells. And its whole job is to move food, and that food is just the sugar made from photosynthesis, from the leaves, because again, photosynthesis happens in the leaves, to the rest of the plant. Now, this process is called another T word, translocation. So we might get those confused. Please remember those. Is called translocation. Okay? Now, because we're moving sugar from the leaves to the rest of the plant, unlike xylem that only moves in one direction, phloem can move in whatever direction it needs to, up, down, sideways, all the way through all the roots and the veins of all the plants. Now, up until this point, this has all been review. We've either gone through these lessons in class or they've been assigned for homework, and so all those PowerPoints should be posted on our old Google Classroom if you want to look back and review what I went through versus what I did today. But right now we are actually starting on, we didn't really get into a lot of details on how plants reproduce and the reproductive process of plants, and so that's going to be sort of the only new information that I have introduced so far. So to start off with, plants have a different life cycle called the alternation of generations. Plants actually cycle through two distinct phases. So we have a diploid phase and a haploid phase. And these two vocab words, diploid and haploid, are old vocab terms all the way back from mitosis and meiosis. And if I remember diploid also meant double, okay? And we used to represent it by 2N. And all that means is that it has two copies of the DNA. while our haploid is just one N, which means it has one copy of DNA. Okay, this gets a little complicated, but I'm going to show y'all a video to hopefully break it down. Plants cycle through sexual reproduction and an asexual reproduction phase. So oftentimes you've heard me say, oh, plants reproduce asexually, but I've also said yes to students that say, do plants reproduce sexually? And it's because they actually do both. If Miss Lynn can figure out how to clip in a YouTube video in the middle of this, I will attach a YouTube video explaining this here. So I'm going to pause, and if it works, you'll see it. If not, pause this video and go to the link that's going to be in the description of the YouTube video I post. But hopefully it will work. Pause.
Today, we are going to talk about the concept of alternation of generations, with a focus on angiosperms, or flowering plants. This is part 1 of a 5-part series. The alternation of generations is a phrase that describes the life cycle of a plant. The life cycle of a plant is divided into 2 phases, a sexual phase and a growth phase. Because this is a cycle, you can start at any point, but we are going to start with the sexual phase. The goal of the sexual phase is to produce gametes. Gametes are male and female sex cells that combine in pairs to form a zygote, or fertilized egg. The male gamete is called a microspore, and the female gamete is called a megaspore. They are collectively referred to as spores. In angiosperms, the male and female gametes fuse together and eventually form a seed. This seed begins the growth phase. The new plant grows from the seed and matures until it can produce sex organs. When the sex organs form, the sexual phase can begin again, and the cycle is completed. In plants, the sexual phase is called the gametophyte phase, and the sexual organs are called the gametophytes. The growth phase is called the sporophyte phase, and the rest of the plant, everything excluding the gametophytes, is called a sporophyte. We'll now identify the gametophytes and the sporophyte on a flower. Here we see the side view of your typical flower. The male gametophyte is found within this part of the plant, called the anther. The female gametophyte is found in this part of the plant, and is called the ovary. In summary, the gametophytes of the flower are the anther and the ovary, and their job is to produce gametes. The rest of the plant, or the plant in growth phase, is called the sporophyte. The sporophyte's job is to produce the anther and ovary so it can reproduce. Let's take a look at an actual flower for reference. This is a lily, and I'll outline the anthers in black. Now I'll outline the approximate location of the ovary. The ovule within the ovary hosts the female gamete. I'll now give you a 10-second summary of what we've learned. Each stage in the cycle exists to create something that perpetuates the next stage. The gametophyte creates gametes that fuse to form the seed. The sporophyte grows a plant which can support the sex organs. Thank you for watching this video on the alternation of generations with a focus on angiosperms.
So after watching that video, there's a lot of small, minute details that you're not going to have to memorize. But let's just kind of break it down a little bit. Okay, so reproduction in flowering plants actually takes place within the flower. And we've kind of broken down the parts of the flower, so hopefully this will understand a little bit better. But flowers actually contain reproductive organs surrounded by specialized leaves called the sepals and the petals. Now, the sepals and the petals are not the reproductive organs. The reproductive organs that we talked about are going to be the stamen, which is our male, and it's made of that anther and that filament. If you remember, they looked like that. And it's also made up of the pistil or the carpel. You'll see both. Carpel. And those are our female. That's our female part. And that would be in the middle. So that contains our style all the way up here, our stigma, and then our ovary and our ovule. And so those right here are going to be our reproductive organs. But those brightly colored petals, they have a purpose. They attract animal pollinators. And then a flower is pollinated, again, when that pollen grain, let's say a pollen grain right here, reaches the tip of the female reproductive structure called the style right here. So when that pollen moves, that is when a flower is pollinated. So again, let's say I have red pollen, and when my red pollen touches the style at the tip of my plant, one cell in the pollen grain grows into a pollen tube. And so a tube will actually form all the way up this style. And other cell divides into 2 sperm. So basically what this is saying is that this pollen grain is made up of 2 cells. One of these cells will fertilize and actually fertilize the egg that's in the flower's ovary all the way down here. So this one's going to go to fertilize this one. This one's not going to be used to fertilize. This one's actually going to be help produce an endospore, which is going to actually nourish the embryo. And so when we talk about seeds, which are going to be basically the product of this fertilization, the endospore is actually what surrounds the seed and will actually provide nourishment to that seed. So that's why plants actually have this thing called double fertilization, because this one pollen is made up of 2 cells and both have separate jobs. And so although we didn't talk about it, that endospore is really important for germination. So when we have a seed right here, and it gets, soil, nutrients, sunlight, water, everything that it needs, it was able to survive so long because of the endospore that surrounded the seed. And then when it's germinated, it will actually break out of the seed coat and grow into a seedling as shown in this picture. Now, how does fruit help disperse those seeds? Obviously, fruit is tasty. When the seed eventually will grow into a fruit, it will have it, when this pollen fertilizes the ovary, that will grow into a fruit, and it will have a seed inside it. And fruit obviously helps disperse the seeds because animals will come and eat the fruit, pass the fruit through their body, and poop out the seed, hopefully in some nourishing soil so that it can fertilize and grow. Now, some plants can actually produce genetic clones of themselves through asexual reproduction. Some plants can grow a new individual from a fragment of a stem or a leaf or a root through regeneration or propagation. If you've ever seen me pull leaves off my cacti are one of those things that I can actually break off a part of my cactus, put it in a moist environment like on a wet paper towel for a couple days, and I'll come back and it'll actually have a small bud and a root, and I can replant that and it'll grow into a whole new cacti. So there are certain plants that actually will do this asexual reproduction. This process is often used in agriculture to produce plants with desirable traits. So if we see a cacti that we really like and it's really pretty, we can take pieces of that and grow more of them, so we get the traits that we continually want. So this process, where new individuals grow from, let's say, a stem, a leaf, or even part of the root, that's actually, it has a name, and it's called vegetative reproduction. I won't test y'all or quiz y'all on that. I just thought it was interesting and wanted to share. Vegetative reproduction. And humans, again, use vegetative reproduction and also propagation to allow plants to reproduce asexually. Okay, awesome. So that was the end of our plants mini lesson. The only homework you have is a worksheet. It's a Google form at the top. So this independent practice is in a Google form in that Google Classroom folder that I have for plants. You will be reading an article from National Geographic. It's about, it takes me about 10 minutes, so I would suggest that it would take about 15-20 minutes to read through. And then there are 3 questions to answer that are short answer questions. That is going to be a Habit to Scholarship grade when we have our gradebook back up and running. And it will be submitted on Google Classroom through that Google form. So you don't have to submit anything. You just type your answers into that Google form and hit submit, and I will have your answers. So in summary, really quickly, I'm going to write out the things that you have or opportunities that you have. So on March 25th, you're going to watch the plant lesson, complete that independent practice article, and that again is on a Google form. And then you're also going to complete exit ticket, which is again on a Google form in that Google Classroom folder. I know a lot of information just popped up on the screen, but I just wanted to go ahead and write it all out. On March 25th from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m., which is going to be that Thursday, I'll have a Zoom meeting. I had 5 people. Shout out to both Fatamatas, Brooke Brown, Heather, and I forgot who else came in and then immediately left. But shout out to all those people who came. We had a lot of fun, at least seeing each other and talking to each other. Since I haven't seen y'all in 2 weeks, please come just to say hi or ask a question or just hang out. We can hang out and just talk for an hour. If you want to make that Zoom time just a hangout time, we can also do that. But I'd love to see y'all's faces or at least hear your voices. Please come to that. You can join via this website or this meeting idea. If you have a Chromebook, again, I don't think you can log on to Zoom on the Chromebook, but if you download the app, you can call in if you download the Zoom app, or if you have a laptop or a personal desktop or a personal computer at home, you can join via this link and it'll pop up. And the last thing is on March 25th, we are going to have another lesson on body systems. It'll be the first body systems review video. You're going to have an independent practice and an exit ticket Google form as well. But the major thing is that you're going to have your first quiz. Again, this quiz is not over the body systems. It's going to be over plants and viruses, our first 2 days of lessons. So go back, watch those videos, complete all the homework before midnight, and then complete that quiz by midnight. Again, you won't be able to open any other browser. So that's just a warning to make sure you have your notes written down. Okay, if there's no more questions, this is goodbye from Miss Lynn, and I will see y'all later. Okay, have a great day.